How do you look at the Greece story? Is the entire Greece Grexit story clouded by your thoughts about what Britain should and shouldn't do with Europe? Because these, to some extent, these are entirely separate conversations. That, you know, we're not in the euro, Greece is, and that's why many would argue that they're in the position that they are now.
Well, that's certainly true, but it's important to understand that within a few years, by I think 2020, I think 24 out of the 28 European countries are going to be in the euro. In other words, there is going to develop a two-track EU, the countries within the euro and the countries outside, which actually makes it easier for us to renegotiate our strategy. But the Greece story goes back to the 1990s, when everybody was talking about should there be a euro and who should join it.
And what should the criteria for membership be?
Exactly, and I co-authored a book. Actually, it was aimed at the Labour Party, and it was quite successful because it was aimed at the old Labour guys like Gordon Brown, who did actually come out against joining the euro. And our book was called "Do Not Go Gently Into That Good Night." And we tried to envisage what would the euro be like, and we tried to we gave an example of what happened in Greece, except we didn't come up with Greece because nobody thought that Greece was going to be allowed to join the euro. So we had to give Italy as the example, and to our astonishment, Greece was actually allowed in the euro. So it was a calamity waiting to happen, and it's still a calamity waiting to happen, and maybe it'll happen this weekend, maybe it'll happen, you know, next year, maybe it'll happen next decade. Greece, you know, is going to leave the euro. But the point about...
Well, here's an alternative analysis. This whole drama around Greece forces some change within Greece, and Greece reforms and actually manages to run an economy that looks more like the rest of Europe, has monetary conditions and fiscal conditions that look more like the rest of Europe, and therefore manages to be a better member of this monetary union, because the whole question is whether they have similar enough economies, isn't it, really?
Yes, and the reason why the whole Europe project doesn't work is that the economies are very different in terms of the amount of tax take each country can get out of its population. Greece has never managed to get more than 30%, and it used to be much less, of GDP in taxes. UK has stayed steady for 60 years at 36%. In fact, it could be argued, it doesn't matter what George Osborne does in the budget, he's going to get 30% of the GDP out of taxes. And what's really important is to grow the GDP, not try and tinker with the tax base, because you ain't going to get more. Now, in France, you can get 50% out because their culture is so different. In Germany, you can get 40% out. You can't get more than that. It's like a flat Laffer curve. Doesn't really matter what you do with taxes. The amount of take you get is the same. Now, Greece leaving, as you say, the euro, then has the fascinating issue. Can it stay in Europe with the way that Greece is? If it doesn't, you've got all sorts of problems. You're back to immigration, because immigration starts at the Greek border with Europe rather than with the Greek border with the Aegean, and it becomes a lot more difficult to control immigration with the rest of the world.
Yes.
But you're absolutely right that all of this will make it much easier for the UK to have to negotiate a much better relationship with Europe, because Europe is showing itself flexible to negotiation now when the crunch comes.
You mentioned the fact that there could be a two-speed Europe. I mean, is that a way to go? Is that a line to pursue? You know, we need to have one type of Europe that works for those in the Eurozone, and one type of Europe for those who want to be in the EU but not in the Eurozone, and acknowledge that there are two types of Europe and make policy on two different tracks.
We show that that is the case. One of the points, though, Anna, is negotiating trade agreements. We gave up the ability to negotiate trade agreements with anywhere in the world when we joined Europe. So we haven't negotiated a trade agreement since the 70s. Europe, turns out, can't negotiate trade agreements with anybody. TTIP is just not happening. We haven't got a trade agreement with China. All these other countries are able to do that. We're not. We would like to get back the ability to negotiate our trade agreements, because that will be tremendously important for UK exports.